How you doing, guys? Welcome to Designing Mobile Games for iPhone and Android Part 1. Basically, we're going to go over elements, how game designers make games that are addictive. There's a secret recipe that PopCap or Gameloft or any of these big companies have that make the games, even the most basic game, a great game just by using certain elements that a lot of game designers indie game designers might forget to put in their game or maybe never thought of in a game. So we're gonna discuss the format, how they do it, what do they add, and hopefully you'll get something out of it that you haven't thought of before, and maybe after this lesson you'll learn it. All right, number one, plan the structure. Now, one big problem with indie game designers, uh, that's different from the console counterpart, is that before you even start typing one bit of code, you should have the game already laid out. Alright? It's important for several reasons. Number one, you need to know what art assets you need. If you're gonna hire an artist, you need to know what to tell them, what art assets. Uh, Another thing is that you need to know what features you're gonna have, what features you know how to code, and what features you have to look up how to code. Alright? Now, a big mistake a lot of indies do is that they go, they have an idea for a game. Let's say it's a runner game, right? They're like, oh, I know an awesome runner I could make. Okay, and then they go up and they open up their program, whatever tools they use to make games, and they start typing in code, and they don't even have the art ready, so they just grab art from here or there, and they just start mashing up a game together and then basically making the game as you go, which they're used to. But actually, the proper way is to first, turn off the computer, all right? Forget about programming anything. The first thing you need is pen and paper. You start writing out, all right? Let's say it's a runner. All right, what is he gonna be able to do? Like jump, dash. All right, boom, there you got it. Are you gonna make levels? Are you gonna break up the game to levels, or are you gonna make it endless? How many screens is the game gonna have? The start screen, the menu, the shop screen, the achievement screen. All these things that go into your game, you should have it written down already. It will help you later, even though it's annoying and you might not be used to it. So in the beginning, it's gonna feel kind of odd if you're not used to doing it, but it's gonna help you in the long run. All right, make your game complete. You know, you don't go through this phase where you're like, oh man, I wanted to put this in. Oh, I want to put that in. If you're sitting down writing out your game, writing out what you're gonna include in your game, how the UI is gonna look, just a basic draft. Um, that will give you a better visual of what you need to put your game together. And like I said, there might be some parts you don't know how to code. So then you know what to look up to code, and it'll make your life a lot easier and your program bug free. Because if you just start just making the game without designing it on a piece of paper, you tend to have bugs later on when you get deep in the program and you forget something, and then you have to go back and put it in, and you might not know how it affects something else. So plan the structure. That's the first thing. All right, that's really important. Now, the second thing, and this is probably, honestly, everything is of equal importance, but this one I would say is the most important. And it might not seem like it, but let me describe it. It's the flair. All right. Let's take a real simple game like I just mentioned, a runner, so we'll use the runner example. All right. There's tons of runners out there. What makes one different than another? It's the flair. What is flair? Okay, I'll give you an example. All right, let's just take the start screen, for example. All right, you have the start menu, you have the start button, options, achievements, missions, the shop, the game shop where you can buy power-ups and stuff. All right, let's say you press a button. What happens? All right, a normal game, you press a button, it goes into a level select. But that's real basic. It doesn't really engage the user. So let's say you have a button, you press it, and it lights up. Now it all it did was light up, but the user already has a feel like he's getting into it. Now let's say you press the button and it lights up, and then little stars go all around the screen. Now the user is engaged. All he did was press the start button. But you got to understand that we are all human beings are visual creatures, and the more we see happening with the less we do, the more we get impressed and the more we get into things. So, like I said, you press the start button, it lights up, stars go all around, you hear a sound like dun 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 dun. Already the user's, I mean, you got his attention. Now he's focused. Now you go into the game. All right, let's say you have a character. All right, he's running because it's a runner. All right, now, a basic runner would just have the character, whatever he is, a man, animal, alien, whatever, and he's running. But that's okay. But if you want the person to be drawn to that character, you have to add more flair. So let's say as he's running, he's leaving a trail of stars behind him. All right, or let's say a rainbow, like Robot Unicorn Dash. Right, even just a little effect like that has a big impact. All right, in keeping the user's attention, and it has that how would you call a wow effect on the player. Something very simple. It has a wow effect. Now let's say he dashes, all right? You can have him dashing just like him running with his fist. But, that's of course basic. But if you have like a halo around him, around his body when he dashes, now that's a wow factor. People are looking at it like, wow, oh, it just feels right. It feels different and it feels fun because only with a little bit of feedback, you're seeing a lot happen. Okay, and now beyond the character, let's say he collects a coin, right? Most games you're collecting coins, so let's say he collects a coin. Now he collects a coin. Let's say it makes a noise like ting, and it disappears. All right, that's okay, but again, you're missing that flair factor that these other companies do. So they can make the same exact game you make, but for some reason it just feels different. Now, you run into the coin. If you want the flare effect, you can make the coin get larger and then disappear. Like it, like explodes like a balloon, like pop. And it disappears. Or you can make it fly off the screen. Like every time he collects a coin, it just flies off the screen. And the flare is just taking little things and really focusing on them. All right, to make a big picture and make it so that when the player is playing, he feels totally engaged. All right, because every little thing that he does has a big response. All right, and that's what makes games addicting, and it makes gamers just love games. All right, and love your game. Also, let's say the backgrounds. How could even that is part of the flare effect. Now, a lot of games will have a static background. But if you look at some of the great games, they have stuff going on in the background. Like, even a very basic game, like since we're using runners, for example, let's say Cannonballs, black and white, okay. But you see he has flare. Even in the background, there's things moving around in the background. It's alive. So now, for a basic example, let's say you have the ground, you have trees, and clouds. Have those three parts of the background move in different speeds as you're running. That will make an awesome parallax effect, and that will just make the player just be immersed in your game. All right, flare, I would say, is the most important thing because some games they might not even have all the great design elements, but they have flair and they do well because people are addicted to that feedback, that visual. All right, which ties into my next point: graphics. There's huge debates about graphics online. They're like, oh, gameplay over graphics, blah blah blah. All right, let me ask you a question. When a new phone comes out, what's one of the first things that a company will advertise about that phone? They'll be like, oh, Retina display, oh, this many pixels, HD, Super HD, right? They're talking about the graphics, what you see. The same thing with video game consoles. When they get a new console, what's the first thing? Oh, what's the specs, man? What's the video card? What's the resolution? What type of graphics? Next gen console graphics. All you hear about is graphics. So even though, like I said online and in forums, you hear this gameplay over graphics. Let me tell you something. Graphics sells the game. All right, gameplay keeps the player playing the game. But graphics are very important. Um, I know it's hard to find an artist if you're a programmer. If you can do great art as a programmer, that's awesome. But if you can't, you should look into getting a artist. And I know you might be saying, "Ah, I'm an indie, and I'm on a tight budget." I'm gonna tell you something. Sometimes you just gotta find a way. The same way you found a way to get tools, or you just gotta find your way. There's a website called DeviantArt. There's a lot of artists there. I'm pretty sure you could get one at a decent price if you're an indie. You just have to talk to a couple of people, and hopefully somebody will help you out. But if you're trying to make money, right, but you want to be super cheap and not spend anything, it's gonna be hard for you. All right. Anyway, graphics are very important. If your graphics are bad, it's gonna be very hard to draw a player to your game unless you have a great amount of people talking about your game. Word of mouth. You have to have awesome word of mouth if your graphics suck. That's plain and simple. Alright, and then lastly is controls. And this is something I see developers do wrong time and time again. And this could affect your game in a negative way. Now, listen. With mobile gamers, the least amount of controls that they see on screen, the better. Alright? So if you could avoid putting buttons on the screen, then avoid doing it. Don't do it. Alright? Like I said, I'm going to continue earlier with the example we were using, a runner. If you have a jump and a dash, right, you don't need to put a jump button and a dash button. Alright? You could just easily make it so that they press one side of the screen to jump, and then they press the other side of the screen to dash. Alright? I'm going to tell you why. And this is psychological, alright? And this will sound very weird, but it's true. If there's no on-screen buttons, but people know, alright, this side of the screen you press, or that side of the screen, what they'll do is when they play the game, they will subconsciously make sure that their finger is out of their field of vision. Alright, because they have that screen real estate to use, they will make sure their finger is out of their view as much as possible, subconsciously. But if you put buttons, then they feel like they're forced to that spot. Alright, so now they're focusing on the controls and the game. And let's say they have a mishap and they die, they're going to blame the controls. Right? And it sounds crazy, right? It sounds not. You'll be like, what? The controls are fine. They'll be like, oh, the controls suck. They don't work, man. I mean, I pressed the button and it didn't work. It's because they get distracted with buttons. I don't know why, but that's the way it is. So find inventive ways not to have buttons on screen. All right. Of course, certain games you make, you're gonna have to have buttons on the screen, but as much as possible, try to limit that. All right. Try to limit that. Or if you do have buttons, make sure the tappable space goes outside of the button so that they have leeway. So if they go a little off the button, they still get feedback, and then they'll stop focusing on the button. All right. And if you do the flare effect, as I mentioned earlier, that will keep them focused on the game and not on the buttons. But try to limit the amount of buttons that you put on screen, as much as you can. And that's it for now. All right. On part 2, I'll discuss more on how you can make your game addictive and do well in the app stores. Thank you for listening.